something that is not in the mainstream tonight, but something that I do think you need to know about. Now, for as long as I have been a reporter and a broadcaster, I have seen how the circle of natural disasters has worked. Now, 20 years ago, when something terrible took place, normally the politicians would go nowhere near it until it was over, the fire was put out, the people were starting to move back into their house. But then that cycle has got faster and faster and faster now, where the politicians are definitely there the next day. And as we saw with some of the politicians, like Jim Chalmers getting around with his orange vest, he was right in the middle of the disaster. Well, I want to take your mind back to some huge floods that you can see right now in May of this year that were around the Taree region in New South Wales. They were devastating, but they didn't seem to get the wall-to-wall coverage. They didn't get the full prime ministerial visits, but of course they did get the visit from the Premier. Now, I like Chris Minns, and he has been generally pretty good when it comes to these emergency events. In fact, this is what he said in May while being there, the couple of hours after everything was going on.
We want the community back on its feet as soon as possible, and we know agriculture is a big part of the economy up here. It's a crucial part of ensuring that not just for farmers but also for the ancillary businesses and employees in town. So we're going to be looking at that really closely.
Now, the truth about government, and we all know this, is that the only decisions that end up on a leader's desk, let's be honest, are generally sort of terrible sandwiches. That's the nice way of putting it, but you know what I'm saying. Terrible sandwiches. Bad choice A, bad choice B, bad choice C. The ministers, if they can make the easy decisions, are making it, and of course the bureaucrats are making series of decisions beneath that. So if the Premier is true to his word, and I believe him to be true to his word, then he needs to reverse a decision which has been made somewhere in government that doesn't hold up to the premise that when you are the victim of a natural disaster, the government is there for you and will be there for you for a long time. Now, May of this year is 6 months ago. Not 2 years ago, it's 6 months ago. Today we learn that grants of up to $25,000 which have been made available to small businesses are about to be turned off. The local MP who has been writing and raising issues about this, Tanya Thompson, will join us on the show a little bit later because this is what she has heard back from the relevant minister with the news, not just to her, but more importantly to the small businesses, including agriculture and all those other people that you heard the Premier talk about. In a letter to Mile Lakes MP, Tanya Thompson, on Monday, Ms Saffron said she understood that many small businesses feel they require further support. Now, in fairness to Ms Saffron, she is from the upper north coast of New South Wales, so she knows the issues of recovery in and around places like Lismore. But feel they require further support? No, they just require further support, Minister. I've been an advocate for ongoing support, says the Minister. However, as you know, we are operating in a challenging fiscal environment. To date, our advocacy has not been successful. I am sorry to inform you of this, and I will, of course, keep you updated on any progress made. So thanks very much for the letter, but computer says no. I've tried to go somewhere to say, hey, can we find another computer? But the minister says, computer says no. That line is really jarring to me, that they feel that they require further support. These are not businesses that are going to be taking the $25,000 that may well be available to them and spending it on bonuses or a booze up. It's about being able to either keep people employed, keep the lights on, keep the doors open, keep the feed coming, you name it. The reality is that if we are going to give politicians the endless upside of letting them go to natural disaster areas and hold hands and show how compassionate they are, then we have to keep the hammer on them. The same media that gives them that part of the cycle, keep the hammer on them to make sure that the people that they purport to care about so much so that they will go and literally help them move the things out of their front yards, that 6 months later, the help is still there. Now, not everyone needs it, but for those who do, we've got to do better than just turning the tap off after 6 months, right? And while no doubt someone from the Premier's office is writing an email to us now about the availability of this grant and that grant, there clearly is a problem here. So out of respect for the people of Taree, I need you to stick around all the way towards the end of the show to show to the Premier, to the government, to the media, in every state, in every city, in every regional area of this country, that it matters 6 months on. Because while I know we all live busy lives and the news cycle moves within a day from one thing to another thing to another thing to another thing, and you go, oh, that's right, that happened 6 months ago. But for the people who are living it, it's a different type of tough. There's still issues in and around Lismore. And I'm not just talking about from the Alfred stuff, I'm talking about from the way back when of a couple of years ago. So please, stick around to the end of the show. We've got a lot to talk about here. And again, benefit of the doubt I'm trying to give here is to the Premier, who when he hears this, when he sees this, works out that this is something that we can do better with, because we can do better with all of this. Now, as we know, the most triumphant, greatest meeting in the history of relationships between the Australian Prime Minister and the American President took place in the past couple of days. As I mentioned before, the sickliness of the 6 p.m. news referring to it triumphantly. But of course, in many ways, the reason it was so triumphant was because they never really talked about the stuff that we know they disagree on. And I mean really disagree on, like this.
Climate change.
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 Climate change. Climate change.
And despite the fact that for the ambassador, this was the moral dilemma or whatever he put it of, the great challenge of the 21st century, didn't bring it up. Notice, because, you know, it's not about that anymore. We've moved on to something else. For the Prime Minister, he, of course, says that if you don't believe in net zero, you don't believe in climate change. And last time I checked, the President doesn't believe in net zero.
If you don't support net zero, you don't support action on climate change. It's as simple as that.
Well, of course, part of the response to all of this has been people suggesting that Australia can do its bit to save the world, even though they're 1%, we are 1% of the world's problem. You know that. And let's even be overly frightening and say we're 2% of the world's problem. Just future-proofing against inevitable complaints for pointing out the lack of logic in and around some of this stuff. Well, coal is a massive export for Australia. It is one that has long kept the lights on, has long been used as an export to other parts of the world, to pull it out of poverty in India. And when Zelensky asked of all of the things that Australia could do to help in the war with Russia, guess what the thing was he wanted? Coal. Now, I get it, it ain't perfect for the environment. But I also know that people like the Greens believe that it should be turned off, because if we turn it off in Australia, then we will magically, with 1% of the world's problem, be able to fix the weather forever. No more bushfires, no more floods.
The government isn't looking at the costs of the damage that those coal and gas companies are doing to us all. It's
also, what is beep is that if all of the greenie groups get their way and, you know, mining just stopped tomorrow, apart from rare earth minerals, because remember, that's the thing, that's the only thing that matters now. I just love how we move. You know, climate change, it's so damn important, but we should have more mining. Okay, rightio, Prime Minister, can you pick a lane here, please? The reality when it comes to mining, a sector we support because it keeps the country and the budgets of this country federally alive. It employs so many people, wonderful, big-hearted people doing great things for our country. We always have, love the mineral sector. They pay about $60 billion in tax from the royalties at the state level, the federal level, the company tax, the payroll tax. So if mining just went away the way that the climate zealots would wish it to do, somebody's going to have to find $60 billion to help pay for everything in this country. You can't just all put it on the credit card and fingers crossed China will never call in the debt, although that seems to be the plan, with a budget deficit growing every year for the next 40 years. $1 trillion debt today, becoming $2 and even higher, but nothing to see here. But interestingly, while Australia has this attitude towards coal that you can't use it for electricity despite how well it has worked in the past, and you can't give it to Ukraine because it might keep the lights on, and some kids say they go to a court and argue that coal mining should be banned because of the future generations, guess what the world is using more of than ever before? Coal. You're right. You're 100% right. Ding, prizes for everyone. And that report does not come from the minerals sector. It instead comes from aggressive climate change organisations. The Systems Change Lab released a report today. The Guardian clutched its collective pearls while, of course, begging for money. If you've ever been on their website, they ask for donations all the time. Coal use hit a record high around the world last year, despite efforts to switch to clean energy, imperiling the world's attempts to rein in global heating. The share of coal in electricity generation dropped as renewable energies did surge ahead, but the general increase in power demand meant that more coal was used overall, according to the report that I just mentioned. You see, that's the thing. The climate zealots want everything to be electrified, but the systems have not been built to electrify everything without using the old school polluting technology in coal. Now, we get better at it, they try to get cleaner at it, but obviously no one's going to pretend that there is such a concept as sort of no emissions coal. So I understand the issue here. But don't you love every time someone gets sanctimonious about Australia and its lack of action, that when you are looking opposite the President of the United States, the guy running the country that has pulled out of the Paris Accord, that will be able to do 10 times, I think 13, but 10 times more damage to the climate than Australia will, you might bring it up. But no. A triumphant meeting means don't mention the war. The Basil Fawlty approach to international diplomacy. Rare earths, all the media writes it down. And because they want to stick it to everyone who's ever disagreed with this Prime Minister or the media who prop him up, triumphant. It either matters or it doesn't, right? And as for Chris Bowen, who didn't go on the trip to the United States because, climate change of it all, don't believe in net zero, then you don't believe in climate change. Thanks so much for the support, Mr. President. I might put that in my 2028 ads. Honestly, triumphant. Today, despite the fact that there is more coal being used to generate electricity for billions of people who do not live in Australia, at a climate and energy conference today, Chris Bowen is, of course, ripping into the Queensland government. Why? Because they are doing what the rest of the world is doing, which is to keep coal around for longer. Not forever, but for longer. Why? Because maybe, just maybe, all the little spinning things and all of the little shiny things may not actually be able to do what needs to be done. And again, just a reminder, Australia is 1% of the world's problem. If you look at the climate clock, like midday, quarter past, half past, 13% the United States. Not mentioned by the Prime Minister introduced the mining tax, who said it was the moral thing of the decade, not mentioned by the Prime Minister who says if you don't believe in it, you don't believe in climate change, because it was all there to tick a box, and the media who just throw rose petals in front of these people now. It's ridiculous. Interestingly, we know that when Australians had a chance to vote for what Anthony Albanese thought would be his greatest achievement, as opposed to the result of 2025, and getting to more than 90 seats, because, of course, he was able to campaign against the coalition saying that it was too Trump-like. But then when Trump complimented him, he'd said he'd put it in his ads for 2020. Is anyone keeping track? Anyone at all? We know that Australia said no, hell no. Victoria said no, hell no to The Voice. For whatever reason, the majority of people in the majority of states, in fact all states, bar the ACT, said no. Yet, something even bigger than the idea of The Voice was the concept of a treaty. And that is one that we know the Victorian government says, yeah, despite the fact that the people of Victoria, since the last election, voted on the issue of the voice and said no, we're punching on with the treaty anyway because Daniel Andrews promised it at the last election. You know, the same election where he ended up increasing his majority and thunderingly beating the Liberal Party because they weren't woke enough, despite the fact that his government had helped see the state crumble, the O system ultimately end up being responsible for 33 people's lives being lost. But whatever, come on, man. Get back on the program. As long as they're just morally better than everyone else, tick. The Institute of Public Affairs put some polling out today, which is interesting to see, about how many people actually support the process that is going to happen, legislation before the Parliament as we speak. 37% of people say they support the treaty, 42% say no, and 21% say don't know. So as always, if you halve 21%, well, who does that help? That helps, of course, oppose more so than it does to support. Where do people support this stuff? Well, it may not surprise you. Young people, people with a master's degree, people who live in the inner metropolitan area, people who vote Greens and people who voted yes for the voice are all the people who agree. Once you take out the option of don't know, what happens? Support goes from 37 to 48, opposition goes from 42 to 52, which is why the Victorian Liberals think they are onto a winner. Why? Because they have a plan to get rid of it before the next state election. But when the margin is 52-48, is that going to flip like it did 60-40 when it comes to the voice? Who knows? Now, got to say something unpleasant, but I'll do it anyway because it's the truth, and that is all that we are owed each and every day. We've had a good couple of days of people being able to see things for what they are, with the trots and loons running around fighting with police in Victoria. And this show is pro-cop. To the men and women of the police forces all over the country, I back you in, I back you in, I back you in. I back in the strength of that officer who a few days ago came in and told everyone about the rocks being thrown at police, and it really felt like one of those moments where momentum was up, support for the cops was up.
These were being thrown at police.
Then comes today. Today, front page of the Herald Sun, story about the Chief Commissioner of Victoria Police using a helicopter at $10,000 an hour to fly from Melbourne to Tasmania to go to a conference. Here's a bit more detail from Channel 9 tonight in Melbourne.
The police chief copping heat for using one of the air wings to fly to Tasmania for a police leaders forum. Mike Bush says a hectic day of meetings on Monday meant a commercial flight didn't seem feasible at the time.
Please. Now, I like this commissioner because, you know, he's empowering his officers to call BS on the media narratives, to call BS on the lefty protesters, to call BS on they're all the same. Yet, what has been growing in momentum and support and clarity of the past couple of days, well, it hits the fan. Here is the Chief Commissioner trying to talk about it today, at least not offering excuses, but talking about it. Remember, only talking about it because of the front page of the paper today, not because they suddenly thought they should confess.
There are reasons for doing that, but they're not an excuse.
Well, there is, of course, no need for it to be done. There might be a reason, but there is no need. It is excessive, and as always in these things, it's not about how it looks, it's about how it is. And what it is an unnecessary use of the resource. Because for obvious reasons, Victorian helicopters should be able to patrol that state 24/7. Now, I'm not getting all palaszczuk on you about Queensland hospitals are for Queenslanders. No, I'm talking here about a resource that should have always been available, because who knows what happens when it comes to an emergency. At least here's, for what it's worth, sorry, but hopefully a lesson learnt by everyone here, pull your head in. Because what the message we need to hear from police is about the truly bad guys, the people throwing the rocks and the crims who are being let off by a piss-weak judiciary and a government that wants to change the subject.
It was the wrong thing to do. I have apologised and I will apologise again.
Okay. Now, apparently there are more millionaires than ever before in Australia, symbolised here by Scrooge McDuck diving into a vat of money at the start of the incredible 80s cartoon DuckTales. I, by the way, never understand how he didn't break every bone in his body diving into that many coins, but still. Apparently, more millionaires than ever before when it comes to Australia. Why? Because our houses are worth more. In fact, there has been a very significant number of people that are now considered paper millionaires. Your asset is worth $1 million. Outer suburban areas in the mortgage belts of Brisbane and Sydney are among the latest postcodes to join the once rare $1 million club, with 1 in 3 Australian properties now worth more than $1 million. I'm sure this feels good to all the kids who haven't bought one yet, and I'm sure it feels even better to the people who bought one a long time ago. 1 in 3 Australian properties now worth $1 million. Brisbane has led the surge after becoming the nation's second most expensive property market last year, adding 38 new suburbs to the list of $1 million suburbs over the past year to September. It just beat out Sydney, which had 36 new entrants or suburbs, with more than 70% of house and unit markets valued at least $1 million. Repeat, 7 out of 10 in Sydney are now worth house or unit more than $1 million. If you are in any of these suburbs, congratulations, you are now Scrooge McDuck-esque on paper. Baulkham Hills, $1 million suburb. Glendenning, $1 million suburb. Rooty Hill, $1 million suburb. Rhodes, $1 million suburb. Penrith, $1 million suburb. In Melbourne, Keilor Lodge, $1 million suburb. Taylor's Lakes, new $1 million suburb. In Brisbane, you got places like Redland Bay, Wynnum East, Boondall, Victoria Park, $1 million suburbs. Enjoy here in Duckburg. Might solve a mystery. Anyway, or rewrite history. Okay, DuckTales. Okay, out of the head. Now, let's talk about the AFL and AFLW, because it is really vital that we have professional female sports that have the highest possible levels for young girls to aspire to go and play. Now, you know, as we've gone around the country, as we will this weekend in the ACT, we get to shine a light on the support of particularly female sport from the great Katie Page and Harvey Norman. And it's been great to meet many of these athletes and to hear their stories. And as you saw me training, they are premier athletes. There is a little trouble, though, with the AFLW competition when you talk about what's happening this year. And I'm not talking about on-field action. That's for others to have whatever opinion they wish. But the ABC has noted that there is a problem about the number of people that are physically turning up to the games. One of the biggest challenges with the AFLW, it is facing its end-of-year footy fatigue. You see, they keep their season going post the men's grand final in the last weekend of September. In its 10th year, crowds have now sunk to an average of 2,500 per game, down from 2,660 during the home and away season last year. Now, obviously, a fully professional, fully televised, fully corporately supported sport should be able to be getting more than 2,500 people turning up to a game. Now, initially, when the crowds were much higher than that, yes, there was no charge when it comes to the tickets. But the ABC today tried to have a little bit of a look about why, right? Is it footy fatigue because footy keeps going and starts to overlap with things like the start of the NFL season, the 2020, the one day, the start of the cricket season? Yeah, maybe. My suggestion for where the AFLW competition should sit is probably take it back to the start of the footy season, in the many weeks leading into the football season, because I know, as a person who pays attention to TV ratings every single day, I am aware that people will turn on sport. And I know that sometimes when you think a sport may or may not attract, people want to watch it, okay? And that's cool. I love it, right? I do too. But to me, you'd put that at the start of the season to get the early taste of football. Maybe, potentially, midweek games, a midweek competition through the normal season. Maybe that can boost the crowds. Because while, yes, at the very start it all felt very woke and the form felt a little bit weak, the reality is that these women are incredible athletes who are going to inspire kids like my daughters. So I want this competition and NRLW and female soccer, netball and everything else to thrive as it should. Stand by for the emails about, Paul, you've gone woke. No, Just being honest. It may surprise you if you live in Sydney or Brisbane, but I'm going to tell you it was hot today. If you live in Melbourne or Adelaide or Tassie, not as much. In fact, when it was almost 40 degrees in those two areas, I'm having a look, and in other parts of the country, we're still down at about 18 degrees. Well, it was bloody hot. Again, we ended up in a scenario where we were starting to push 40. Now, that is something that will always happen in summer, but it's pretty unusual for now. So, according to Sky News Weather, why was it so hot today?
We are seeing still significant heat for the time of year, and that's all thanks to all of this heat funneling in, as I said, from the northwest. Now, we started out seeing a northerly coastal breeze, but we've seen these winds wrap around from the northwest into parts of New South Wales. We're looking to pivot the heat towards the north. So if we have a look further north across northern Queensland and into the Northern Territory over the next few days, we're still seeing that heat build and a heatwave warning still in force across those areas.
And exactly when is it going to start to get cool?
As we can see on the map here, that's starting to drive in that cooler air. Sydney will be down to 22 degrees, so temperatures will be dropping around 15 or 16 degrees across the board. So a real change on the way for Thursday. However, Queensland's still hanging on to that heat.
And while you were working, finally earning some money for yourself, not earning for the tax man, let's see how federal politicians decided to spend your money playing showbiz for ugly people and pretending they're hosts on Play School, like, oh, it's our old mate Cara.
There's nothing better than a freezing cold beer on a hot day.
I think there is.
Oh.
A freeze to the beer excise.
I'll cheers to that.
I love that they go, we've freezed beer taxes. You let them go up for 3 years in a row, you let petrol tax go to 50 cents. Another great example of the people who think that we're all mushrooms and keep us in the dark and feed us.
I'm in Canberra today for an NDIS committee hearing, and before we get underway, I better get my burpees out of the way.